My name is Teresa, and I'm 58 years old. The day my son raised his voice at me over property was the day my heart cracked in half. I never thought I'd live long enough to see my own child turn against me. If someone had told me years ago that Marcus, my firstborn, my pride, my husband's mirror, would one day look at me like a stranger, I would have laughed it off as nonsense. But life has a way of breaking the illusions you cling to the hardest. I live alone now, in the same farmhouse my late husband and I built nearly 30 years ago. It's an old place with creaky floors, ivy crawling up the stone walls, and the scent of cedar that never quite leaves the air. Every board, every window frame carries a memory: laughter, birthdays, long nights during storms. It's not just a house, it's our life's work, the last piece of him I still have. After my husband, David, passed away, I devoted myself to keeping this home alive. Our children, Marcus and Liana, had already grown up and moved out. Liana married a teacher and built a quiet life in the city. Marcus, on the other hand, had big dreams. He was ambitious, confident, sharp, just like his father once was. But where David had humility, Marcus had pride. For years I excused his arrogance as drive. "He's just trying to make something of himself," I used to tell David. But even David once said quietly, "Don't let ambition eat his heart." After David's death, Marcus visited often at first. He'd bring flowers for the garden or fix things around the house. But slowly, his visits changed. The flowers stopped, the kindness faded, and every conversation started circling back to the same subject: the property. It began subtly, like raindrops before a storm. "Mom," he'd say casually, "you know, it might be easier if the deed were in my name, just in case something ever happens to you." I'd smile politely and say, "There's no rush for that, Marcus. Your father wanted me to hold on to it." He'd nod, pretending to understand, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Then, as months passed, the tone shifted. "It's not practical for you to keep it, Mom," he said one evening. "You're not managing the land, and I could use it as an asset for business. It's better for everyone." "Everyone?" he said, as if I wasn't part of everyone. Liana, my daughter, was the only one who seemed to see through him. "Mom, please be careful," she warned me. "He's not being honest about what he wants it for." I wanted to believe she was wrong. Marcus was my son, my baby boy. He wouldn't lie to me, not about something like this. But denial is a mother's comfort, and it blinded me longer than it should have. One Sunday afternoon, Marcus came to lunch. Liana joined too, and for the first time in years, both my children were under the same roof. I had cooked roast chicken, just like old times. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic, and I thought maybe things can feel normal again. But as we sat down, Marcus wasted no time. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the property again," he said, cutting straight through the silence. Liana sighed. "Marcus, not now." He ignored her. "It's time to put the deed in my name. I've been patient, but you're not getting any younger. If something happens to you, the estate will get messy." The words hit like a slap. "Messy?" I repeated quietly. "Your father and I built this home for our family, not for convenience." He leaned forward. "Then think of it as protecting the family. You can still live here, nothing will change." "Except the name on the deed," Liana muttered. Marcus glared at her. "You don't understand responsibility, Liana. You're content living small. I'm thinking long term." The tension thickened. I felt my pulse quicken, my chest tightening. "Marcus," I said softly, "your father trusted me with this. I'm not ready to hand it over." That's when he snapped. He slammed his fork down, eyes blazing. "You're being unreasonable. You've had your whole life here, and I'm the one building a future. You'd rather give it to her, wouldn't you?" He pointed at his sister. "You always loved her more." The words cut through me like glass. I couldn't speak. Liana stood up, furious. "Don't talk to her like that. She's done everything for you, Marcus." He pushed back his chair violently, the sound echoing through the dining room. "You think you deserve it, don't you?" he shouted at her. "You've always been her favorite." "Enough," I said finally, my voice breaking. "This isn't about favorites. It's about family, something you're forgetting." He laughed bitterly. "Family? You mean control." He stormed toward the door, his face red with anger. Before walking out, he turned and spat out the words that would haunt me for months. "I deserve this house more than she ever will." The door slammed behind him, and the silence that followed was heavier than grief. Liana stood still, her face pale. "Mom," she whispered. "What's happening to him?" I sank into my chair, shaking. "I don't know," I said quietly. "But it feels like I've just lost my son and he's still alive." That night, I sat alone in the darkened dining room, staring at the empty plates and half-eaten food. The echoes of his anger clung to the walls like shadows. In that moment, I realized something painful. Marcus didn't see this house as a home anymore. To him, it was an asset, a prize, a transaction. And for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if a mother's love could survive greed. That evening, he shouted the words I never thought I'd hear: "I deserve this house more than she ever will." "Would you like me to continue with Section 2, The Pressure Builds, next?" You said, Section 2J. Revenge Stories said, Section 2, The Pressure Builds, approx. 850 words. At first, I thought my son was just stressed until he started acting like a stranger in my own home. The weeks after that argument were quiet, but not peaceful. Silence can be its own kind of punishment. Marcus didn't call, didn't visit, and didn't answer my messages. Liana checked in every day, worried about me, but I could see the worry in her eyes went beyond concern for my feelings. She was afraid of what Marcus might do next. I told her she was overreacting. "He's just hurt," I said, trying to convince both of us. "He'll come around." But deep down, I wasn't sure. There was something different about Marcus now, a hunger that had nothing to do with love or ambition. It was greed, plain and sharp, hiding beneath that charming smile he always used to get his way. A few days later, he showed up unannounced. I was pruning the rose bushes when I saw his car in the driveway. He stepped out, dressed in a crisp suit, carrying a leather folder. He looked like he'd come straight from a meeting, not to visit his mother. "Mom," he said, all warmth and politeness. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but nodded. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where he'd once eaten pancakes as a boy, his feet swinging from the chair. Now, he sat like a businessman negotiating a deal. He opened the folder. "I brought something for you to look at. Just a few documents that'll make things easier down the line." I frowned. "What kind of documents?" "Just standard transfer paperwork," he said quickly. "It's still your house, but it'll be under my name legally. It's safer for tax purposes and for you." There it was again, that word, safe. He said it like a salesman, not a son. I folded my hands. "Marcus, I'm not signing anything without reading it carefully. I'll take it to a lawyer," he sighed dramatically. "Mom, that's not necessary. You're overcomplicating this. I'm trying to help." His tone was calm, but there was a flicker of irritation behind his eyes. The same look David used to get when someone challenged him, except David never used that look on me. I reached out and placed my hand over his. "Marcus, I know you want what's best for me, but this house isn't just a property. It's where your father and I built our life. It's all I have left of him." He smiled tightly. "And I'm trying to make sure it stays in the family. But you're not getting any younger, Mom. One accident, one hospital stay. Do you really want Liana fighting courts over this?" That was when I realized something. He wasn't talking about protecting me. He was talking about securing himself. When he left that afternoon, the house felt smaller somehow, as if his presence had drawn all the warmth out of it. I sat by the window, watching his car disappear down the dirt road, and for the first time, I felt afraid of my own son. That night, Liana came over. I told her everything, and she didn't even look surprised. "I knew it," she said softly. "He's desperate, Mom." "Desperate?" She nodded. "I did some digging. He's not doing well, financially. His company's been losing clients for months. He's borrowing from people, bad people, from what I've heard. He probably wants the deed to use as collateral." My hands trembled. "Collateral? My God. I think he's in deep, Mom, and he's using you to pull himself out." I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing the living room, replaying every word Marcus had said. Every "I just want to help" suddenly sounded like a lie. The next morning, I found a voicemail on my phone. It was Marcus. His tone was softer, almost apologetic. "Hey, Mom. I'm sorry about the other day. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just trying to keep things organized. That's all. Love you. Love you." Those two words sounded hollow. Now, like a line rehearsed for convenience. Over the next few weeks, he called constantly, sometimes kind, sometimes angry. His mood swung like a pendulum. "You're making a mistake," he'd say one day. "I'm only trying to protect the family." he'd claim the next. Liana advised me to block his number, but I couldn't. He was still my son. Then one evening, he came again uninvited, carrying that same folder. He set it on the coffee table and leaned back, smiling. "Mom, I brought simpler forms this time. No legal jargon. All you have to do is sign." I stared at the papers but didn't touch them. "Marcus," I said quietly, "do you even hear yourself? You're talking like I'm just a name on a title, not your mother." His smile faltered. "I'm trying to make things right, Mom." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You're trying to make things yours." The mask dropped for a split second. His jaw clenched. His eyes hardened. "You're going to regret this." He stood abruptly, grabbing his folder and storming out. The sound of his car engine roared down the drive like thunder. I sank into the armchair and covered my face with my hands. My heart hurt, not just from fear, but from something worse, disappointment. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, I took out an old photo of Marcus as a boy missing his front teeth, holding a wooden airplane. I whispered, "Where did you go, my love? What happened to the boy who built dreams instead of destroying them?" That night, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a teenager: greed. "Would you like me to continue with Section 3, the documents he brought next?" You said. Section 3J Revenge Stories said. Section 3, the documents he brought approx. 850 words. He placed the papers on the table like it was nothing, but those papers were my husband's life's work. The next time Marcus came by, I already knew it wasn't for a visit. He didn't call ahead. He never did anymore. His car's headlights cut across the front porch just as the sun was setting, and my stomach tightened like it always did before a storm. He walked in as if the house still belonged to him, though. In his mind, maybe it did. "Evening, Mom," he said, setting a sleek black folder on the coffee table. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thought I'd drop by and make this easier for everyone." I forced a smile. "Easier?" He gestured toward the folder. "These are the finalized documents. I've already had my lawyer look at them. All you have to do is sign, and the house will be secure in my name, but, of course, you'll still live here. Nothing will change. Nothing will change." I'd heard that before, and it was never true. Before I could answer, the front door opened again. Liana stepped inside, holding a grocery bag and looking surprised. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" He smiled too easily. "Just taking care of business." "You wouldn't understand." "I understand more than you think," she replied, setting her bag down. "Mom, what's this?" He sighed, exasperated. "Don't start, Liana. I'm doing what Dad would have wanted." That made me snap. "Don't you dare use your father's name to justify this." His expression hardened. "He would have wanted the estate protected. And you think the only way to do that is to take it from me?" I asked. Liana walked over and grabbed the folder before he could stop her. She flipped it open and scanned the first page. Her face drained of color. "Mom, this isn't just a transfer of management, it's a full ownership transfer." Marcus rolled his eyes. "It's just wording, legal phrasing." "No," she said firmly. "It says here that once signed, Mom forfeits all rights to the property. You'd have complete control." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Marcus, you tried to trick me?" His tone turned defensive, his voice rising. "I was going to tell you. You never listen. This is for everyone's good. The property's valuable, and you don't know how to handle it." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I've handled this home for 30 years, alone. Don't talk to me like I'm a fool." He stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. "You're being emotional. That's why Dad left things in your name, because you can't make business decisions." "Stop," Liana said, stepping between us. "You're not talking to a business partner. You're talking to your mother." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, guilt, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You've always babied her," he muttered, snatching the folder from Liana's hands. "You two think you're better than me." Liana's voice trembled. "Marcus, this isn't about being better. It's about being decent." He turned toward the door, his shoulders stiff. "You'll regret this," he said without looking back. "You both will." When he left, the house fell silent except for the sound of my uneven breathing. Liana sat beside me on the couch, her hand finding mine. "Mom," she said softly, "we have to protect you. He's not going to stop." I looked at her, my daughter, my calm after the chaos, and felt an ache of gratitude. "He's my son," I whispered. I don't want to hurt him. I know, she said, but he's already hurting you. We spent the rest of the evening reviewing the papers he'd brought. Every line was a trap, vague enough to sound innocent, legal enough to destroy me if I signed. His name appeared in bold across the signature page, waiting for mine to follow. It felt like betrayal printed in ink. That night, I placed the folder in a drawer and locked it. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Some part of me still hoped that Marcus would come to his senses, that this hunger for ownership would fade, and the boy I raised would return. But as the days went by, his messages became more manipulative. "You're being unreasonable," he wrote once. "I'm trying to protect you. You're letting Liana poison you against me." I deleted the messages, but the guilt lingered. It's strange, even when your child hurts you. The instinct to protect them doesn't disappear, it just hides under the pain. A week later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It was from a bank I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter addressed to Marcus, sent to my address by mistake. It mentioned pending loan applications and secured collateral property. My hands went cold. He'd already listed the estate as his own. I sank into a chair, staring at the letter. My son hadn't just lied to me, he'd used me. That night, I sat by the fireplace, staring at the deed hanging in its glass frame above the mantel. My husband's signature still sat neatly beside mine. He'd signed it with pride, never imagining it would one day divide the family he'd worked so hard to build. I sat at that table alone, staring at the papers he left behind, and realized my son was ready to steal from me. "Would you like me to continue with Section 4, my daughter's warning next?" You said. Section 4J Revenge Stories said, Section 4, my daughter's warning approx. 900 words. Liana's voice trembled when she said it. "Mom, he's in trouble." After that night, something inside me shifted. I still loved Marcus, but the way I looked at him had changed forever. I couldn't pretend anymore that his behavior was just stress or misunderstanding. He wasn't confused, he was calculating. And the more I tried to deny it, the more evidence piled up around me. A few mornings later, Liana came by with coffee and a look on her face that made my heart sink before she even spoke. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly around the mug. "Mom," she said quietly, "I've been doing some digging. I think Marcus is in real trouble." I frowned. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" The financial kind," she said, glancing away. "He's been taking loans from people who aren't exactly patient." I called one of his former business partners. He said Marcus owes a lot more money than he's admitting. My chest tightened. "How much are we talking about?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Hundreds of thousands." The room spun for a second. I gripped the table. "That can't be right. He has a company, investments, clients." "Not anymore," she interrupted softly. "The company's practically gone. He's been trying to save it by mortgaging everything he can, even things he doesn't own. That's why he wants the deed, Mom. He wants to use it as leverage." I stared at her, horrified. "He would never." Liana's eyes glistened. "He already has. The bank letter you found, that's proof." I stood and walked to the window. The fields outside stretched endlessly under the morning light. David and I had worked those fields for years, planting, harvesting, struggling, and rejoicing through every season. I could still see his smile when we paid off the final loan on this house. The thought that Marcus could throw all that away in a moment of greed made my heart ache in ways I can't describe. "Does he know that you know?" I asked. Liana shook her head. "No, I haven't told him anything yet. But I think you should talk to a lawyer, Mom, soon." I turned back to her, my voice trembling. "I can't take my son to court, Liana." "You're not taking him to court," she said gently. "You're protecting yourself and Dad's memory." Her words cut deep, because they were true. David had trusted me to keep this house safe, but I'd spent years letting guilt and love cloud my judgment. Now, that love was being used against me. That evening, I found myself sitting in David's old armchair by the fireplace, holding one of his sweaters. It still smelled faintly like him, wood smoke and pine. "What would you do, David?" I whispered. "He's our boy. How do I protect him from himself?" The silence answered for him. A few days later, Marcus showed up again. He seemed calmer this time, almost charming, too charming. "Hey, Mom," he said, walking in like he hadn't stormed out weeks ago. "I've been thinking about our argument. Maybe I pushed too hard." My guard went up instantly. "Maybe?" He chuckled. "Okay, I did. I just want what's best for you. I talked to a few people, and we can make this easy. You'll have full residency here, lifetime rights. The paperwork will just be for ownership transfer, so I can manage it better. You won't even notice the difference. I wanted to believe him. For a split second, I saw the boy who used to help me in the garden, who brought me wildflowers and called me Mama. But when I looked closer, I saw calculation behind his smile. Marcus, I said slowly, why do you need to manage it at all? You live in the city. You don't take care of this land. He shrugged. It's not about the land, it's about securing the future. Think of it as an investment. Whose future? I asked quietly. His smile faltered. Ours. The family's. I wanted to ask which family he meant because lately, it didn't feel like we were part of the same one. After he left, I called Liana. She came over immediately. I told her everything, every word, every look. She sat silently, thinking, then said something that chilled me to my core. Mom, she whispered. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. What can I do? You need legal protection, now, before he finds another way. The next morning, Liana made an appointment with a lawyer for us. But that night, before we went, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the framed photo of Marcus on the wall, him at 16, smiling proudly next to his father after fixing an old car together. I remembered how David's eyes had shone with pride. He's got your hands, I'd said back then. He's got my fire too, David had replied. Just pray he learns to control it. Now I realized that fire had turned into something darker, something consuming. When Marcus called again the next day, his voice was syrup sweet. Mom, I hope you're thinking about what we talked about. I am, I said carefully. Good, he said. Because time's running out. I need to finalize things this week. There it was, the pressure, the urgency, the greed masked as practicality. When I hung up, I turned to Liana, who had been listening from the hallway. Her face was pale. He's desperate, she whispered. Mom, you can't face this alone anymore. I nodded slowly. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was finally forming. But when I hugged him, I noticed his eyes, and I knew that apology wasn't for me. It was for the deed. Would you like me to continue with Section 5 when he brought strangers to my door next? You said, Section 5J Revenge Stories said, Section 5, when he brought strangers to my door, approx. 950 words. The day my son came with two men in suits, I finally understood what fear truly felt like. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels too ordinary to become a turning point. The sun was warm, the garden was quiet, and I was hanging laundry when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I looked up, expecting Liana's car, but what I saw made my stomach sink. Marcus's silver sedan, followed by a black SUV I didn't recognize. 3 men stepped out. Marcus was in front, looking confident, smiling too easily. Behind him were 2 strangers in tailored suits, carrying briefcases. They walked toward me with the calm of men who thought they already owned the place. Mom, Marcus said cheerfully, as if the last few weeks hadn't been a storm between us. I brought some people I wanted you to meet. I wiped my hands on my apron, trying to stay composed. Who are they? They're investors, he said, glancing toward the house. They're interested in seeing the property. You don't mind, right? My heart dropped. Interested in seeing the property? I repeated. Marcus, what are you talking about? He sighed, lowering his voice. It's just business, Mom. I told them this land might be available for a partnership deal. It's nothing final, I just wanted to show them around. Available? My voice cracked. This isn't a showroom, Marcus. This is my home. One of the men stepped forward, extending a hand. Mrs. Delaney, pleasure to meet you. We've heard so much about your land. Prime location, perfect for development potential. I didn't shake his hand. Development? I whispered. What are you planning to do here? Marcus looked irritated. Mom, you're overreacting. I'm not selling anything yet. But opportunities like this don't wait forever. Before I could answer, Liana's car pulled into the driveway. She got out quickly, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. What's going on? She demanded. Marcus turned, already defensive. I'm just showing some people the property. It's a courtesy. Liana crossed her arms. Without Mom's consent? He rolled his eyes. She's overprotected. I'm handling it. No, Marcus, I said, my voice trembling but firm. You're not handling anything. This is my house. You had no right to bring anyone here. The investors exchanged awkward glances. One cleared his throat. Perhaps we should come back another time. Yes, I think you should, Liana said sharply, stepping closer to me. The men nodded and left, their polite smiles fading quickly. Marcus stood frozen, his jaw clenched, watching them drive away. What did you just do? He hissed. I stopped you from embarrassing yourself, Liana snapped, and from destroying what's left of this family. He turned to me, anger blazing in his eyes. You always let her run things, don't you? She's the golden child and I'm the screw-up. Marcus. No! He shouted. All I ever wanted was a chance to build something bigger, to prove myself, but you're too busy worshipping a dead man's memory to see it. The words hit me like a slap. Don't you dare talk about your father that way, I said quietly. He laughed bitterly. You still think he was perfect? He left me nothing. You got the house. Liana got her education. What did I get? A pat on the back? I felt my hands shaking. You got our trust, Marcus. You had all of it. Until now. His face twisted. You'll regret this, Mom. I swear you will. He stormed off toward his car. Liana followed him halfway down the drive, her phone in hand. Marcus, she called. Say that again. Go on. He froze, realizing she had been recording the conversation. His expression changed first fear, then fury. You're pathetic, he spat. Both of you. He got in his car and sped off, the tires spitting gravel. When the sound of the engine faded, I sank onto the porch steps, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Liana sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Mom, she said softly, we have proof now. He threatened you, and he tried to sell property he doesn't own. That's criminal. I nodded numbly, staring at the empty driveway. I don't want to destroy him, Liana. He's still my son. She sighed. You're not destroying him. You're saving yourself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. I kept thinking about those men in suits, how confidently they'd walked around my yard, like they'd already seen blueprints I didn't know existed. I could almost hear Marcus's voice whispering, It's just business, Mom. In the morning, I found muddy footprints by the back gate, big, heavy ones that didn't belong to me or Liana. My heart dropped. He had come back after we'd gone to bed. For what? I didn't know. But the feeling of being watched clung to me all day. I called Liana, my voice shaking. He was here last night. I'm coming over, she said immediately. When she arrived, she checked the locks and the windows. We're going to the lawyer tomorrow, she said. No more waiting. I nodded, clutching my coffee mug with trembling hands. My whole body felt cold despite the sun streaming through the kitchen window. As night fell again, I stood in the living room, staring at the framed deed above the fireplace. The inked signatures, mine and David's, looked smaller now, as if time had started fading them. I pressed my hand to the glass. You told me to protect this, David, I whispered. I won't fail you. When I went to bed, I locked every door and window in the house for the first time in my life, but even with the locks, I didn't feel safe. Because the danger wasn't outside, it was the person I'd raised. That night, I locked every window and whispered to my husband's photo, I think our boy is gone. Would you like me to continue with Section 6, the visit to the lawyer next? You said, Section 6, J. Revenge Stories said. Section 6, the visit to the lawyer approx. 850 words. Walking into that law office felt like walking into a confession booth. The morning after Marcus brought those strangers to my door, I barely slept a wink. My coffee tasted like ash, and my reflection in the mirror didn't even look like me, just a tired woman who'd spent her life building something her own child now wanted to tear apart. Liana came to pick me up early, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. We didn't say much on the drive. The silence between us carried everything that needed saying. When we arrived, the brass sign on the old brick building read, Clark and Associates, Estate and Family Law. I hesitated at the entrance, my hand on the door handle. I can't believe it's come to this, I whispered. Liana squeezed my hand. You're not doing this to hurt him, Mom. You're doing this to stop him from hurting you. The office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Behind a polished desk sat a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a bun. Mrs. Delaney? She said, standing and offering her hand. I'm Miss Clark. Please, come in. Her tone was calm but firm, the kind of voice that made you feel both safe and seen. I followed her into a room lined with files and old law books. She gestured for us to sit. Your daughter filled me in a bit, she said gently. Why don't you tell me, in your own words, what's been happening? I took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly as I told her everything from Marcus's first request about the deed, to the papers he brought, to the men he'd brought to my door. I spoke slowly at first, then faster, as the emotions spilled out. When I finished, Miss Clark nodded thoughtfully. I've seen this before, she said softly. Adult children attempting coercive transfers from elderly parents. It's more common than people think. The word coercive made my stomach twist. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. He's my son. I just want to protect what's left of our family and this home. She smiled kindly. That's understandable. We can protect you without destroying him. But you need to be legally prepared. Because from what you've told me, your son isn't going to stop. He's already tried manipulation and intimidation. The next step will be legal action. Liana leaned forward. He's already threatened to take her to court. Miss Clark nodded. Then we need to act before he does. Mrs. Delaney, I'm going to suggest 2 immediate steps. First, we'll place a protective clause on your deed, ensuring no transfer can occur without your notarized consent. Second, we'll prepare an amendment to your will, designating who inherits the property upon your passing. That will eliminate any gray area he can exploit. I blinked. Amend my will? Yes, she said gently. Your husband left everything to you, but you haven't assigned a successor. If your son's intent is to force the issue, this will stop him. My throat tightened. I never wanted to choose between my children. Miss Clark folded her hands. Sometimes, love means making a choice to protect the ones who honor it, not the ones who abuse it. Her words cut deep, because they were true. Liana reached over and took my hand. Mom, you don't have to decide today. We just need to make sure Marcus can't touch anything for now. I nodded slowly. Do it. Whatever we need to do. Miss Clark smiled softly. Good. I'll file the protective clause today. And if he tries to claim you're incapable of managing your estate, which I suspect he might, we'll have this consultation on record to prove otherwise. He would never say that, wouldn't he? Miss Clark asked gently. You told me he accused you of being emotional and unfit to make business decisions. That's how these cases usually begin. I looked down, shame creeping in where anger should have been. The idea of my son painting me as senile or incapable was unthinkable, and yet, I knew she was right. Liana's jaw tightened. We'll fight it. Miss Clark nodded. We'll prepare everything. And Mrs. Delaney, if he contacts you again in person, by phone or through a lawyer, refer him to me immediately. Do not engage directly. When we left the office, the sky was gray and heavy, mirroring the weight on my chest. Liana drove in silence until we reached home. As I stepped out of the car, I looked at the house, our family home, my husband's pride, my sanctuary, and I realized for the first time it had become a battlefield. Inside, I made tea but couldn't drink it. My hands kept shaking. Liana sat across from me, her eyes full of worry. Mom, she said softly, you did the right thing. Did I? I whispered. Because it feels like I just declared war on my own child. You didn't declare it, she said. He did. You're just defending yourself. That night, I found myself in David's old study, sitting at his desk. His handwriting still filled the pages of the old ledger where he kept records of every repair, every expense. I ran my fingers over the ink and whispered, You'd know what to do, wouldn't you? But he wasn't here. It was just me, an old woman fighting her own flesh and blood. When I finally went to bed, the phone buzzed on the nightstand, a new message from Marcus. You're making a mistake, Mom. Don't let her manipulate you. I'll be by this week, and we'll settle this once and for all. The words chilled me. Not because of what they said, but because of what they implied. He wasn't done. When Miss Clark said, You'll need to choose your successor now, my heart froze. Would you like me to continue with Section 7, a mother's decision next? You said, Section 7, J. Revenge Stories said. Section 7, a mother's decision approx. 900 words. Choosing between your children is something no mother should ever have to do. That night, I barely slept. The lawyer's words kept echoing in my head. You'll need to choose your successor now. How could I possibly choose? They were both my children. I had carried them in the same womb, fed them at the same table. loved them with the same heart. But somehow, that love hadn't been enough to keep them from becoming strangers to each other, and to me. By morning, I'd made up my mind to visit my husband's oldest friend, Robert Hayes. He'd known David since they were boys. He was the kind of man who spoke plainly, never sugarcoating what needed to be said. I needed that kind of honesty now more than ever. Robert's farmhouse sat a few miles down the road, surrounded by hayfields. When he saw me at his door, he frowned. "Teresa? You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I haven't," I admitted. Over tea, I told him everything. The arguments, the papers, the threats. He listened quietly, nodding now and then, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed deeply. "I hate to say it, Teresa, but Marcus sounds just like his father when he was young," he said. "David had a streak of stubbornness too, but he learned humility. Marcus hasn't yet." I stared down at my tea. "He's not a bad man, Robert. He's just lost. I keep thinking if I give him time, he'll come to his senses." Robert shook his head. "Time won't fix greed. It only feeds it." His words hit hard because they were true. He leaned forward. "Listen, you don't owe Marcus the deed. You owe your husband the promise you made to protect the land, the house, the legacy. If you want to keep that promise, you need to pass it to someone who'll guard it, not sell it." "You mean Liana?" I said quietly. He nodded. "You already know it. You just don't want to say it out loud." I felt tears burn my eyes. "How do I live with that? Choosing one over the other?" Robert's expression softened. "You're not choosing one over the other. You're choosing right over wrong. There's a difference." I sat there for a long moment, letting his words sink in. He was right. Deep down, I knew Liana would never misuse the fawn inheritance. She didn't crave ownership, she just wanted peace. When I left Robert's house, the sky had turned golden. The fields swayed gently in the wind, and I could almost hear David's voice whispering through the breeze, "Do what must be done, Teresa." That evening, I pulled out a notebook and began writing. The words came slowly, painfully, as I poured my heart onto the page, a letter addressed to both of my children. "My dear Marcus and Liana, by the time you read this, my decision will already be made. I love you both more than you'll ever know, but love cannot blind me anymore. This home, this land, is not a reward or a punishment. It's a trust one your father and I built with sweat and sacrifice. I have chosen to pass it to the one who understands that. Marcus, I pray you find peace and learn that success means nothing without integrity. Liana, I trust you to protect what was given to us with love, not greed. You are both my heart, but only one of you has remembered what that truly means." When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a sealed envelope. I hid it in David's old study drawer, behind the ledger he used to keep his notes in. My hands shook as I locked the drawer, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to calm. Liana came by the next morning. "You look different," she said, setting a basket of groceries on the counter. "Did you sleep?" "A little," I said. "I went to see Robert." Her brows lifted. "Oh? What did he say?" "That I already know what I have to do." She hesitated, watching my face. "And, do you?" I smiled sadly. "Yes." Liana's eyes softened. "Whatever it is, I'll stand by you." I nodded. "I know." Later that day, I walked through every room of the house, touching the furniture, the photos, the walls that had held our laughter and our grief. In the living room, I stopped at the family portrait, David in the middle, Marcus and Liana. On either side, all of us smiling. I whispered to that frozen image, "I'm sorry, my love. I'm doing what you would have done." That night, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. I couldn't tell if it was the storm outside or the one inside my heart that kept me awake. Near midnight, I found myself in the study again, staring at the deed framed on the wall. My husband's signature sat there beside mine, steady and strong. I touched the glass and said softly, "Tomorrow, I'll make it right." When I finally lay down, exhaustion pulled me under. I dreamed of David standing in the field, sunlight behind him. He looked younger, smiling, holding my hand. "You know what's right," he said in that calm, familiar voice. "You always did." When I woke up, tears stained my pillow, but my heart was steady. When I woke up, I knew exactly what I had to do, even if it meant losing my son forever. Would you like me to continue with Section 8, the confrontation, next? You said, Section 8J Revenge Stories said. Section 8. The Confrontation Approx. 850 words. He showed up again, not as my son, but as a man ready to take what wasn't his. It happened 2 days after I made my decision. I was in the garden, trimming the withered roses, when I heard the roar of his car pulling up the drive. I didn't even have to look, I could feel the tension before he stepped out. Marcus always brought the storm with him now. He slammed the door and walked toward me, his posture sharp and cold. "We need to talk," he said flatly. I straightened, setting down my shears. "You've said enough already, Marcus." He followed me up the porch steps. "No. You've said enough," he snapped. "I know what you're doing, Mom. You've been talking to lawyers. You think I wouldn't find out?" I froze, my heart racing. "Who told you that?" He smirked. "Doesn't matter. Word gets around. You're planning to rewrite your will, aren't you? To cut me out?" I met his eyes, steady despite the fear twisting inside me. "I'm planning to protect what your father and I built, that's all." He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think Liana's going to protect it? She's soft, she's weak. She doesn't understand value. She understands honesty," I said. His jaw tightened. "You're letting her manipulate you. She's turning you against me." "No one had to turn me against you, Marcus," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." The air between us crackled with the tension of words we'd both avoided for too long. He looked at me with a mix of anger and disbelief as though I'd betrayed him. He took a deep breath, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said, his tone suddenly cold and businesslike. "But I've spoken to an attorney. If you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice but to file for guardianship." The word hit me like a physical blow. "Guardianship?" He nodded. "If I can prove you're not fit to manage your finances, the court can transfer decision-making power to me. It's not personal, it's legal." I couldn't breathe. "You want to declare your own mother incompetent?" His expression didn't waver. "I'm trying to save this family before it's too late." Before I could respond, the sound of a car door interrupted us. Liana's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing?" She was walking up the path, her phone in hand, eyes blazing. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and glared at him. "Are you threatening Mom again?" He turned toward her, his mask of calm slipping. "Stay out of this, Liana." "No," she said firmly. "I'm not letting you bully her anymore." "I'm not bullying anyone," he snapped. "I'm trying to fix this mess before she ruins everything." "She's not ruining anything," Liana said, stepping closer. "You are. You've already tried to trick her once. We know about your debts, about the investors, about everything." His face went pale. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been protecting her," she said. "Something you should have done." For a moment no one spoke. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. Marcus's hands shook, and I realized he wasn't just angry, he was desperate. "Mom," he said finally, turning to me. "Please, don't do this. Don't let her take everything. You owe me that much." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I'd raised, but the man he'd become. Entitled, bitter, broken by his own choices. "I owe you nothing," I said quietly. "You had every chance, Marcus, every bit of love, every ounce of trust, and you threw it all away." His face twisted in pain and rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Liana stepped between us. "No, Marcus, you will." He stared at her, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off the porch. His footsteps pounded across the gravel, and the car door slammed hard enough to echo through the fields. The engine roared to life, and within seconds, he was gone, a cloud of dust trailing behind him. I sank into the porch chair, my legs weak. Liana knelt beside me, her hand steady on mine. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded slowly, though tears filled my eyes. I just never thought he'd turn into someone I had to protect myself from. Liana squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, Mom. You stood your ground." I looked out at the fading sunlight over the fields, the land David and I had fought to keep, the same land Marcus now saw as a transaction. Somewhere deep down, I hoped that losing this battle would make him face himself. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, I couldn't shake the fear that this wasn't over. Marcus had always been relentless, and when desperate people lose control, they become dangerous. That night, I locked the doors again. I double-checked the windows. The quiet felt different now, not peaceful, but watchful. I could almost feel the weight of the storm still hovering on the horizon. Before bed, I knelt beside the window, staring out at the fields under the pale moonlight. "David," I whispered, "if you're watching, please give me strength, because I think the worst is yet to come. Would you like me to continue with Section 9, the day in court next?" You said. Section 9J Revenge Stories said. Section 9, the day in court approx. 950 words. Facing my son across a courtroom was a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. When Miss Clark called to say Marcus had officially filed a claim against me, my body went numb. It was as if my heart had stopped, not from fear but from disbelief. My son, my own flesh and blood, had gone through with it. He was suing me, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my estate. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. The lines on my face seemed deeper, my eyes duller, but beneath that sadness was something else: resolve. I had spent too many months crying, doubting, and begging the universe for a reason. Today, I wasn't going to beg anymore. Liana drove me to the courthouse. She was quiet, but her hand never left mine. When we pulled up, reporters and curious onlookers were waiting outside. News traveled fast in a small town. I heard whispers: her own son is taking her to court, and every word stung like a fresh wound. Inside, the air was cold and sterile. Marcus was already there, dressed in a crisp suit, standing tall beside a young lawyer who looked barely out of college. When his eyes met mine, I saw no warmth, no love, only determination. I wondered if he felt the same ache in his chest that I did. Miss Clark guided me to my seat. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We've prepared for this. The evidence is solid." The judge entered, and everyone rose. When the proceedings began, Marcus's lawyer stood first. His voice was smooth, confident, rehearsed. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a simple matter. My client, Mr. Marcus Delaney, seeks legal guardianship over his mother, Mrs. Teresa Delaney, who has demonstrated a consistent pattern of poor judgment and confusion regarding her property and finances. We have reason to believe she is being manipulated by her daughter, Liana Delaney, and is no longer capable of managing her estate responsibly." I felt Liana tense beside me. Miss Clark leaned forward. "Let him talk," she whispered. Marcus's lawyer continued, painting a picture of me as frail, confused, and easily influenced. He spoke about my emotional instability and even referenced my husband's passing as a possible cause for my decline. I wanted to scream, "I'm not declining, I'm surviving." But I kept my hands folded, my lips pressed tight. When it was Miss Clark's turn, she rose calmly. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Mrs. Delaney is of sound mind, fully capable of managing her affairs, and that Mr. Delaney's petition is not out of concern but out of personal financial desperation." Marcus's jaw tightened. Clark continued, laying out everything: the attempted manipulation, the fraudulent documents, the investors he'd brought to my home. Then she played the audio recording Liana had taken that day on the porch. Marcus's voice sharp and threatening. "You'll regret this, Mom. I swear you will." I couldn't look at him. Next, she presented the bank letter I had found, the one proving Marcus had tried to use the property as collateral for his own loans. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward, his brows furrowed. Marcus's lawyer stammered, "That's irrelevant to this case." "It's completely relevant," Miss Clark said firmly. "It shows motive, Your Honor. He sought to gain ownership not for his mother's protection, but to cover his personal debts." When it was my turn to speak, my heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table. "Your Honor," I began, my voice shaking, "I am not confused. I am not weak. I am a mother who loved her son so much she ignored the truth until it nearly destroyed her." Marcus avoided my eyes. I continued, "My husband and I worked our entire lives for that home. We built it with our own hands, paid off every loan, planted every tree. I've managed it alone for 15 years. If that makes me incapable, then I suppose every widow in this town is too." Liana reached for my hand under the table, squeezing gently. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Delaney. That will be all." Marcus's lawyer tried to recover, calling one of Marcus's associates as a witness. The man spoke nervously, claiming Marcus had good intentions. But when Miss Clark cross-examined him, his story unraveled. Under pressure, he admitted Marcus had promised to flip the property to pay off debts. That was it. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The judge called a short recess, and in that quiet break, Marcus turned to look at me. His eyes were full of anger, but behind it, for the first time, I saw something else: fear. When court resumed, the judge's voice was firm and final. Based on the evidence presented, I find no grounds to declare Mrs. Delaney unfit. In fact, it appears she has been the victim of manipulation and coercive intent. Mr. Delaney's petition is hereby dismissed with prejudice. The gavel hit the bench, and the sound was deafening. It was over. I didn't feel triumph, only heartbreak. Marcus stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes downcast. The lawyer beside him whispered something, but he didn't respond. He looked smaller somehow, as if all the arrogance had drained out of him. Liana helped me to my feet. "It's done," she whispered. "You're free." But freedom didn't feel sweet. It felt like ashes, like I'd just watched the last bridge between us burn down completely. As we walked out of the courthouse, the reporters were waiting again, shouting questions. I didn't answer any of them. I just wanted to go home. In the car, I stared out the window at the fields passing by, the same fields I once taught Marcus to drive through when he was 16. That boy, the one who'd laughed and promised to take care of me forever, was gone. By the time we reached home, the sky had turned orange with dusk. I stood on the porch, breathing the cool air, my body trembling. Liana stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. "He'll come around one day," she said quietly. "He has to." I didn't answer, because deep down, I wasn't sure he ever would. When the judge dismissed the case, Marcus didn't look at me, and that hurt more than any betrayal. "Would you like me to continue with Section 10, the new deed, next?" You said. Section 10J Revenge Stories said, Section 10, the new deed approx. 850 words. The lawyer placed the papers in front of me. "Who will inherit this when you're gone?" A week after the court hearing, Miss Clark called and asked me to come to her office again. Her tone was calm but serious. I already knew what she wanted to discuss. It was time to make my decision official, to sign the new deed and rewrite my will. The thought alone felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. When Liana drove me there, the sky was pale blue and quiet, the kind of morning that seemed too gentle for the decision waiting ahead. I remember sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window as the fields rolled by, wondering how a mother's love could ever fit neatly into legal paperwork. When we arrived, Miss Clark greeted us with her usual warm professionalism. "Mrs. Delaney, I know this isn't easy," she said softly, motioning for us to sit. "But I want to remind you that this is about peace of mind, not punishment." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "I understand." She laid out the documents on the desk. The top one read, "Property Title, Official Transfer Amendment." Below it was another, "Last Will and Testament of Teresa Delaney." Liana shifted nervously beside me. "Mom, you don't have to rush," she whispered, but I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, we can't keep living in limbo. Your brother made his choice, and now I have to make mine." Miss Clark leaned forward. "This amendment will ensure your son can't contest ownership or make legal claims in the future. Once signed and notarized, the estate will automatically pass to your daughter upon your passing." Her words hung in the air like a final bell. For a moment, I just stared at the papers, the crisp white sheets that held decades of love, sacrifice, and pain. Every inch of this land carried memories. The treehouse David built for Marcus when he was 9. The flower garden where Liana and I used to pick daisies. It felt cruel to decide who would inherit those memories, but necessary. My fingers trembled as I picked up the pen. "Before I sign," I said softly, "I want to include a letter for each of them. It's not for the court. It's for me." Miss Clark nodded. "Of course. We can attach them as personal enclosures." I took a deep breath and began writing. "My dear Marcus, I love you. I always will. This isn't revenge, it's responsibility. You lost your way chasing something that doesn't last, and I can't follow you there. I hope one day you understand this choice wasn't meant to punish you, but to protect what's left of us." Then I wrote another. "My dear Liana, you've carried me through the darkest days of my life. You never asked for anything, and yet I'm giving you everything. Take care of this land, not as a possession, but as a promise. Let it be a home for love, not greed. Let it remind you of where we came from and who we are. When I finished, my hands were shaking. Miss Clark took the letters, sealed them with the documents, and handed me the final page to sign. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I nodded. Yes. The pen glided across the page. My name, Teresa Delaney, written in ink that suddenly felt heavier than its weight. When I lifted the pen, it was done. Liana reached over and took my hand. "Mom, are you okay?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "For the first time in a long time, I am." Miss Clark gathered the papers and placed them neatly in a folder embossed with gold letters. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You've secured your future and your peace." When she handed me the folder, I didn't hesitate. I turned toward Liana, who looked both shocked and tearful, and pressed it into her hands. "This is yours now," I said. "It always should have been." She stared at me, eyes wide. "Mom, I can't." "Yes, you can," I interrupted gently. "Your father would have wanted it this way. You're not taking it from him, he gave it to you through me." Her lips trembled as she held the folder to her chest. "I'll take care of it, Mom. I promise." "I know you will," I said. The drive home was quiet. I watched the landscape pass by the hills, the fences, the stretch of wildflowers along the edge of the property. For the first time, I didn't feel dread when I thought about the future. I felt peace, even knowing Marcus would eventually find out. That night, Liana made dinner just like she used to when she visited after David's passing. We didn't talk about legal documents or signatures. We talked about the garden, the weather, the small things that reminded us we were still living. When I went to bed, the air outside was calm. I stood by the window, looking out at the land bathed in moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, I imagined David's voice whispering, "You did what I couldn't. You protected them both." And maybe that's what I had done, protected not only the property, but the truth. Because sometimes love means closing a door before someone can burn the house down behind you. As I passed her the folder, I whispered, "Protect this, not for me but for what's right." "Would you like me to continue with Section 11? His downfall next?" "You said, Section 11 J Revenge Stories said, Section 11, his downfall, approx. 850 words. You never want to see your child fail, but sometimes failure is the only teacher left." 2 months passed after I signed the new deed. For a while it was quiet, too quiet. No calls from Marcus, no surprise visits, no letters in the mailbox. The silence was both a blessing and a wound. Every day I woke up wondering if the phone would ring with his voice on the other end, or if I'd see his car rolling up the drive again. But nothing came. Then, one morning as I was tending to the garden, Liana came rushing out of the house, phone in hand. Her face was pale. "Mom, you need to see this." She handed me the screen. The local paper's headline read, "Businessman Marcus Delaney faces fraud allegations." I blinked, unable to process the words. Beneath the headline was a photo of Marcus disheveled, angry, surrounded by reporters. The article said he'd been sued by several investors who accused him of falsifying financial statements and using personal property he didn't own as loan security. My heart sank. "Oh, Marcus," I whispered. Liana watched me carefully. "He did this to himself, Mom." "I know," I said quietly, "but that doesn't make it hurt any less." In the days that followed, more news came, every article worse than the last. His company shut down, his accounts were frozen, and one of his business partners pressed criminal charges. He was facing court again, but this time not against me, against the law itself. Despite everything, I couldn't hate him. I wanted to, but I couldn't. No matter what he had done, he was still my son. A week later, my phone finally rang. When I saw his name flash on the screen, my heart leapt and sank at the same time. I answered, my voice trembling. "Marcus?" There was a long silence before he spoke. His voice was hoarse, broken. "Mom," I didn't know what to say. For a moment, we just breathed into the silence between us, two people who used to know each other better than anyone, now strangers bound by blood and regret. "Finally," he said, "they took everything. My accounts, my office, my car, everything." I closed my eyes. "Marcus, I just need some help," he interrupted. "I don't have anyone else to call. I thought maybe," his voice cracked, "maybe you could lend me something, just for now, until I get back on my feet." I wanted to reach through the phone and hold him, to tell him everything would be okay. But I knew that lie would destroy him even more. Marcus, I said softly. I can't give you money, you know that. His tone changed instantly. So that's it? You're going to let me drown? After everything? Everything. I repeated, my voice trembling. You mean after you tried to take the house from me? After you dragged me into court and lied about my sanity? That wasn't me, he snapped. I was desperate. And what are you now? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. I took a deep breath. Marcus, listen to me. I love you. But I can't keep rescuing you from the choices you make. This is your moment to face them, to learn. You sound just like her, he muttered. Like Liana. Then maybe you should listen, I said. There was a long pause, then the sharp sound of him exhaling. You'll regret this, he said bitterly. You'll wish you'd helped me. Maybe, I whispered. But I'd regret it even more if I helped you keep destroying yourself. The line went dead. I sat in silence, the dial tone ringing in my ears. I stared at the phone long after the call ended, tears slipping down my cheeks. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying his voice, the anger, the pain, the hopelessness underneath it. A few days later, our neighbor June stopped by with groceries. She looked uneasy. Teresa, she said gently. I saw Marcus downtown yesterday. My heart jumped. How was he? She hesitated. Not good. He looked lost. He sold his car. He's staying in a motel on the edge of town. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. That evening, I went into the study and took out the old family photo album. I flipped through pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, little moments frozen in time, the smiles, the laughter, the love. Somewhere in the middle was a photo of Marcus at 12, grinning proudly beside David with a model airplane they'd built together. I traced his face with my fingertip. You had everything, my boy, I whispered. Everything. Liana came in quietly, standing in the doorway. Mom, she said softly, are you okay? I don't think a mother ever really is when her child is falling, I replied. But maybe this is what he needs to fall hard enough to finally see where he went wrong. She came closer and hugged me. You've done everything you could. I hope so, I said, closing the album. That night, before bed, I lit a candle by the window, something I used to do when Marcus was a teenager and stayed out too late. It was my silent way of saying, come home when you're ready. I didn't know if he'd ever see that light, or even if he'd care, but I had to believe that somewhere, deep inside the man he'd become, the boy I raised was still alive. That night, I prayed for him, not for forgiveness, but for redemption. Would you like me to continue with Section 12, the letter he never answered next? You said, Section 12J Revenge Stories said, Section 12, the letter he never answered. Approx. 900 words. I wrote him a letter I knew he'd never read. A month had passed since Marcus's call, and though I told myself I was done hoping, I still looked at the phone every night before bed. I still left the porch light on, even when I knew he wasn't coming. A mother's heart doesn't let go easily, it just learns how to keep breaking quietly. One rainy afternoon, I sat at David's old desk, the sound of rain against the window echoing like a soft rhythm of memory. I pulled out a sheet of stationery and my favorite pen, the same one I'd used to sign the new deed. For a long time, I just stared at the blank page. What could I possibly say to the son who'd turned against me, lied to me, and then lost himself completely? Finally, I began to write. My dear Marcus, I don't know where you are, or if you're safe, but I still think about you every day. I keep your childhood photo on the mantle. You're smiling in it, carefree, proud. The boy who wanted to build airplanes with his father. I wonder where that boy went, and if he ever looks back at me the way I still look for him. My hand trembled, but I kept going. I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time, but anger fades. What stays is love, even when it hurts. I didn't give the deed to your sister because I stopped loving you. I gave it to her because she understands what love costs and what it should never cost again. You saw the land as your future. I saw it as your father's memory. Neither of us was wrong to want it, but you lost yourself in trying to own something that was never meant to be owned, it was meant to be cared for. There's a difference, Marcus, and I pray one day you'll see it. I paused, staring at the ink bleeding faintly into the paper. The smell of rain filled the room, and I could almost hear David's voice beside me, steady, gentle, reminding me that some lessons take a lifetime. No matter what happens, you'll always be my son. But love isn't a rescue boat anymore. I can't pull you out of every storm. I've tried. And it only drowned us both. It's time for you to swim on your own. If you ever want to come home, truly home, the door will be open. Not for the man who demands, but for the boy who once believed love was enough. I'll be waiting. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote his name across it in my neatest handwriting. I didn't have an address to send it to, so I placed it in the drawer beside the old ledger, next to the deed that now carried Liana's name. That night, I showed it to her. She read it silently, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mom," she said softly, "he doesn't deserve your forgiveness." I smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me." She didn't argue. She just leaned down and hugged me tightly. When she let go, she added a small note of her own at the bottom of the page. "We still have your room, Marcus. Liana." Then she folded it again and slipped it back into the drawer. We left it there, a silent bridge waiting to be crossed, even if no one ever would. The months that followed were quiet. The house grew softer again, lighter. Liana and I began hosting small gatherings in the barn, teaching local families about estate planning, property protection, and financial independence. It was her idea, but I could feel my husband's spirit in it, helping others learn from the pain we endured. The Solano Foundation, she called it, after David's middle name. It became our shared project, something meaningful and healing. The laughter that had once disappeared from our lives returned little by little. But even amid the warmth of rebuilding, my heart never stopped wondering about Marcus. Every time a car passed down the gravel road, I looked up from my garden, half expecting it to be him. Every unknown number that called made my pulse jump for a second too long, but nothing came. One autumn evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset turn the fields gold. The wind carried the faint scent of rain again, the same scent from the day I wrote him the letter. Liana was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. Everything felt peaceful, finally balanced. Then, from the road, came the crunch of tires on gravel. I froze. The sound grew louder, closer. Liana stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands on a towel. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked. I shook my head, my heart pounding. A dark blue car pulled into the driveway, older, worn, the kind you'd buy secondhand. The engine cut off, and for a few seconds, no one moved. Then the door opened. A man stepped out, thinner, older, carrying the weight of years in his posture. His hair was longer now, his face unshaven. But even from that distance, I knew him. Marcus. My breath caught in my throat. Liana whispered, "Mom." I gripped her hand, unable to speak. My heart was racing, torn between joy and dread. He walked slowly up the drive, his hands empty, his eyes fixed on me. I could see the shame in his face, the kind that no court or punishment could teach. He stopped a few feet away and spoke in a voice that barely carried over the wind. "Hi, Mom." My throat tightened. I couldn't answer. He looked down, swallowing hard. "I got your letter." For a moment, the world stopped moving. Then, one autumn evening, a car pulled into the driveway and my heart knew who it was before I saw him. "Would you like me to continue with Section 13, the return next?" You said. Section 13J Revenge Stories said, Section 13, the return approx. 900 words. He stood at the door, older, thinner, and carrying nothing but regret. When I saw Marcus walking toward the porch, every emotion I'd been burying for years came flooding back: anger, love, fear, and a kind of aching relief I didn't know how to name. The last time he'd stood in that doorway, his voice had been raised and his eyes filled with rage. Now, those same eyes were tired, sunken, almost hollow. "Hi, Mom," he said again, his voice rough from exhaustion. Liana moved slightly in front of me, protective as always. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" she asked, her tone sharp. He looked at her, guilt flickering across his face. "I just came to talk. I'm not here to fight." I reached out gently and touched her arm. "It's all right," I said softly. Then, turning to Marcus, I asked, "Do you want to come inside?" He nodded. Inside, the air felt heavy with silence. Marcus looked around slowly, taking in the familiar furniture, the framed photos on the walls, the house that once had been his pride and later his obsession. His gaze lingered on the mantel, the family portrait still standing in the center. He swallowed hard. You kept it, he murmured. I never stopped being your mother. He sat down on the couch, shoulders slumped. I don't deserve to be here, he said after a long pause. No, Liana said bluntly from the doorway. You don't. I gave her a small look, and she sighed, crossing her arms but staying quiet. Marcus nodded, accepting her words without protest. You're right, he said. I ruined everything. The business, the investors, the family, all of it. For a long time, none of us spoke. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, he said, they took everything, Mom. I lost the house, the car, my reputation, everything I thought mattered. I had to leave the city. I've been working at a warehouse for the last few months. I sleep in a small apartment that leaks when it rains. And every night, I think about what I did to you. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Marcus. He shook his head. No, let me finish. I've had too much time to think. And I realized something. Every time I tried to get ahead, I wasn't building anything I was taking. I wanted control, not legacy. I thought having more would make me worth more. But all it did was make me lose the only people who ever believed in me. He looked at Liana. Especially you. She stiffened. Marcus. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. For everything I said to you, for every lie I told Mom about you, for trying to turn her against you, you were the better one all along. Liana blinked, her jaw trembling. For once, she had no words. I stood slowly and walked toward him. He looked up at me, eyes glassy with tears. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd bring me dandelions and call them flowers, who'd run through these halls laughing. Marcus, I said softly, you lost your way. But you can still come home. He shook his head. This isn't my home anymore. I gave that up. No, I said firmly. You tried to take it. But this house, this family will always be yours, if you come back with a clean heart. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not, I said, my voice gentle. But forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you're given. Liana wiped her eyes, stepping closer. If you mean what you said, she whispered, then prove it. Don't just apologize, change. He nodded slowly. I will. I've already started. I sold the last of what I had left and paid back as many people as I could. It's not much, but I'm trying. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it. His palm was rough, the hands of a man who'd been working hard again, not scheming. Marcus, I said softly, you don't have to earn my love. But if you want to be part of this family again, it has to start with honesty. He nodded, wiping his face. I understand. We sat there together, the three of us in silence. But it wasn't the cold silence of the past. It was heavy with something else. Healing, fragile and slow, like a wound beginning to close. After a while, Marcus looked up at Liana again. Can I see the deed? He asked. She hesitated, glancing at me. I nodded. She went to the study and returned with the folder. She handed it to him carefully. Marcus opened it, staring at his sister's name printed neatly where his used to imagine his own. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, You deserve it. Liana blinked back tears. Marcus. No, he said, shaking his head. You took care of Mom. You protected what Dad built. I destroyed it. You're the one who kept the family together. He closed the folder and handed it back. I don't want it anymore. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot that had been there for years. Maybe finally, he understood. As the evening light faded, I made dinner, simple stew and bread, just like old times. We sat together at the table for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Marcus ate quietly, and I noticed his hands stop trembling for the first time. When it was time for him to leave, he stood at the door for a long moment. Thank you, Mom, he said softly, for still seeing me as your son, even after everything. I smiled through tears. You'll always be my son, Marcus. That'll never change. He hugged me, a real hug, the kind that feels like both apology and promise. When he pulled away, he looked at Liana. I'll make it right, he said. Maybe not today, but someday. Then he walked down the porch steps, his figure fading into the twilight. As I watched him go, I whispered a silent prayer, not for what he'd done, but for what he might still become. That night, when he hugged me goodbye, I felt the son I'd lost begin to return. Would you like me to continue with section 14, the The Legacy I Leave Next? You said, Section 14 J Revenge Stories said, Section 14, The Legacy I Leave approx. 950 words. My son once demanded the deed, but I handed it to his sister, and in doing so, I saved them both. Years have passed since that stormy time. The house feels different now, not because the walls have changed, but because the people in it have. Liana manages the estate with care and patience. The garden flourishes, the rooms are warm, and the memories of past conflicts hang lightly in the air, no longer sharp enough to cut. Marcus visits occasionally. He has changed, slower to anger, more careful with his words. He works locally now, building a small consulting business. He isn't wealthy, but he is honest, and I've watched him rebuild himself the way one mends a broken window, slowly, with patience and care. The foundation we established in David's memory has grown. Liana and I host workshops about property management and family estate planning. Women come seeking guidance, and we teach them not just about law but about integrity and trust. Each story, each grateful face, reminds me that the struggles I endured were not in vain. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I sit on the porch alone and think about the decisions I made. I think about Marcus and Liana and the balance between justice and mercy. A mother's love is complicated. It can be patient, fierce, protective, forgiving, and sometimes painfully impartial. That day I handed the deed to Liana. I knew I was choosing not to punish Marcus but to protect what mattered most: family itself. When people ask me about that time, I tell them the truth. I didn't choose favorites. I chose responsibility. I chose the child who would honor the house and the legacy it represented, not the child who demanded it. Marcus, for all his mistakes, is finding his way. He still makes calls from time to time, sometimes for advice, sometimes just to share a quiet moment. We don't speak of the lawsuit, or the threats, or the months of tension. Those moments are behind us, like the autumn leaves that fall from the trees, leaving the ground soft and ready for new growth. Liana keeps the home and land with respect and reverence. She doesn't flaunt ownership. She tends to the property as if it were a living being, much like I once did. She encourages Marcus to come home without fear, without judgment, and over time, they rebuild a relationship that had been frayed almost beyond repair. The house itself has become a symbol, a reminder that inheritance is not just money or property, but values, history, and lessons carried from one generation to the next. The deed on the wall, framed and carefully maintained, is more than legal proof. It is a testament to what true stewardship means. I have learned that peace does not come from winning battles or enforcing rights. Peace comes from doing what you know is right, even when it hurts. Giving the deed to Liana hurt in ways I didn't expect. I thought Marcus would hate me forever. But in doing so, I also gave him the opportunity to rebuild his character, to learn humility, and to find his own path without the weight of entitlement driving him toward ruin. Sometimes, I see Marcus in the fields at dawn, tending to small repairs, clearing debris, or helping Liana plant new flowers along the edges of the property. He works quietly, without fanfare, and I see a man who has learned responsibility the hard way. Liana watches him sometimes and says nothing she knows the best teaching comes through experience. I have grown older, of course. The lines on my face are deeper, my steps slower, but my heart feels lighter than it did in those early days of fear and betrayal. I have learned to let go of anger, to forgive without forgetting, and to place trust wisely. David's presence still lingers in every corner of this home, in the timbers, in the garden, in the rhythm of our daily lives. Sometimes, I think he would be proud of the woman I've become. Not because I navigated the legal battle perfectly, not because I outsmarted my own son, but because I stayed true to the values we built together. The evenings are my favorite time now. I sit on the porch, the wind carrying the scent of jasmine and earth. Liana hums softly as she tends to her tasks, Marcus sometimes walking quietly behind her. Their laughter echoes through the house, soft but genuine. The tension that once gripped every corner has lifted, replaced by a fragile but growing harmony. I have written my memoir, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the generations who will come after us. I want them to understand that inheritance is not just wealth, it is wisdom, integrity, and courage. I want them to know that making hard decisions, choosing responsibility over convenience, and standing firm in the face of betrayal are the measures of true character. As I sit here, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I think about the little moments that shaped this journey, the arguments, the tears, the letters, the courtroom battles. Each of them taught me something vital, that love is not always soft, that family is not always easy, and that doing what is right may come at great personal cost. But above all, I have learned this. They thought I was giving away everything, but really, I was giving them a chance to find themselves again. Marcus and Liana are no longer defined by the past. They are building their own futures, guided by the lessons they learned and the boundaries I set. And I have found peace. In the knowledge that I acted not out of fear, not out of vengeance, but out of love that was unwavering and true. The house stands quiet now, not empty, but alive. It has weathered storms, disagreements, and betrayal. It has endured just as we have. And I sit here, older, wiser, finally understanding that my legacy is not the land or the walls. It is the family we have preserved, the lives we have shaped, and the love that endures, quietly, through it all. They thought I was giving away everything, but really, I was giving them a chance to find themselves again.